Welcome back to Trans Sandwich by Tarella. Today, I want to talk about the concept of possibility models, popular among some parts of the trans community, and use it to examine how the current dominant discourse of transactivism limits the models of possibility available for trans people and hence are actually harming the trans community. First, let's look at the idea of possibility models. This term was popularized by trans actress Laverne Cox from Orange is the New Black, who used it in an interview back in 2014. I hate the term role model. I think it's presumptuous to think anyone should model their life after me, but I do like the term possibility model and thinking about what's possible, Cox had said. Hence, a possibility model is basically a trans person living out a model of life that can inspire other trans people to realize the possibilities about how their life can be like. In the case of Cox, the possibility is that a trans person can aspire to be a popular actress, for example. I think the idea of possibility models is important because it encourages trans people towards self-actualization, which would also be important for our mental well-being. In a world where trans representation remains limited, the availability of a wide variety of possibility models is especially important for trans people who are at the stage of life where they need to figure out where to take their lives. In my view, individual possibility models embodied by specific people can be further grouped into what I would call models of possibility, more generalized forms. For example, Cox showed trans people who wanted to get into acting that they can be successful too. Nowadays, there are many more successful trans actresses. Together, they show that being a successful actress can be a model of possibility, a general goal to aspire towards for trans people who are interested in acting. Other common models of possibility for trans people include being successful in fields like academia, journalism, computer science, or even being a successful YouTuber, just to mention a few areas where prominent trans people have found success in. I also think that models of possibility are not necessarily limited to careers, because careers are not the only thing that people define their lives by. For example, there are plenty of trans women who are very feminine, and plenty of trans women who have a more tomboyish or gender-neutral presentation and lifestyle. These styles represent a spectrum of models of possibility for newly out trans women still discovering their style. This brings me on to the most important point I want to make here. In recent years, the dominant trans narrative, heavily shaped by the actions of certain activists, paints a picture of a typical trans person as being constantly in intense conflict with various parts of wider society. To be fair, this is not entirely the fault of the activists, because trans issues have indeed unfortunately become a cultural war of football. However, activists have often sought to highlight and heighten those conflicts, contributing to the picture. One thing we need to understand is that it doesn't have to be this way, and it hasn't always been this way. For example, when I first came out as trans back when I was in college, the common picture of a trans person was someone who was singularly focused on their transition to the point where they often else didn't care about much else happening in the wider world. I'm not saying that this was better. It's just that the picture changes depending on the times. The problem with the current picture is that it is effectively suppressing certain models of possibility for trans people. For example, there are many people who are inherently conflict averse, who prefer to use more peaceful and diplomatic means to resolve our differences. Given the random distribution of gender dysphoria in the population, logically speaking, there must be plenty of trans people who are like that. Yet, that almost all of our community representatives and icons tend to be on the loud and argumentative side, the model of possibility of being a diplomatically inclined trans person is effectively suppressed and not readily available to those who would find it relatable. This is why many diplomatically inclined trans people have said that they don't feel like part of the community. Something really needs to change here. I also want to briefly talk about what we discussed in the last episode, the strong influence of the ideas of the mid-20th century critical theorist Herbert Marcuse and the resulting conflation of liberation from oppression with liberation from repression. The problem is that while every one of us would like to be treated fairly in society, not every one of us would like to be liberated from all forms of Freudian repression. By upholding the Marcusean anti-repression ideal as an integral part of their version of transliberation, the activist establishment is effectively suppressing other models of possibility that many trans people would find more relatable. These include, but are not limited to, the possibility of being a traditionally modest trans woman, the possibility of living a community-oriented life in the suburbs, and the possibility of being a religious trans person. These models of possibility might not be for everyone, but true trans justice and liberation would require that they be readily available for those who want them. I guess, just by using my voice to provide my perspective, an alternative trans perspective to the dominant picture out there these days, I'm also providing a model of possibility in the process. I'm trying to demonstrate that it is possible to be committed to trans rights and still embrace a more diplomatically inclined method of resolving differences. I'm also trying to demonstrate that if you reach out to people who might not be entirely in agreement with you, you might still find plenty of common ground and even some friendship. After all, above all, I'm trying to demonstrate that the world doesn't have to feel like a hostile place for trans people, if that's not how you want to see the world. I hope my work can inspire more trans people to embrace the complete picture of who they really are, rather than just accepting what the activist establishment and some parts of society think we ought to be like. That's all for today. I'll be back next time to discuss another big idea. Remember, on this show, the personalities don't matter, it's the ideas that matter. Until next time, remember to resist conformity and stay positive. Our future depends on it.